A somber anniversary, remembering those who lost their lives 5 years ago in Parkland, Florida. Plus, we'll show you how the Oscar nominees are getting ready for the big night. And breaking free, Cara Delevingne tells us how she's putting sexual stigmas to bed with a new project. Hi, welcome to Advocate Today. I'm Tracy E. Gilchrist. Club Q, the LGBTQ plus nightclub targeted last year in a mass shooting, is planning to reopen. The owners are planning to rebuild the venue and reopen it to the public in the fall. The club is partnering with the city of Colorado Springs and a women-owned architecture and planning firm to build a permanent tribute to the victims of the shooting. 5 people were killed and more than a dozen others were injured. The club is also planning to financially help those affected by the tragedy, including former staff. This week, Parkland, Florida is honoring the 17 people who lost their lives 5 years ago at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School. The massacre sparked a national movement led by the students and parents of the community. Their call to action for gun reform is more relevant than ever with mass shootings still occurring every day.
They say that tougher gun laws do not decrease gun violence. We call BS! They say a good guy with a gun stops a bad guy with a gun. We call BS! They say guns are just tools like knives and are as dangerous as cars. We call BS!
Visit marchforourlives.com to learn more about the work being done to remember those who lost their lives. Actress, entrepreneur, model, and activist Cara Delevingne is one of the most recognizable faces in the world. Now she's adding hosts to her portfolio. She's exploring human sexuality in a new Hulu series called Planet Sex. I caught up with the star to talk about learning more about the science of sex, allowing herself to be vulnerable, and more. I wonder if you would start first by talking a little bit about kind of generally why you wanted to be a part of a series like this that touches on sex and gender for, people who aren't necessarily in the mix all the time.
Yeah, I think for me, I wanted this so much when I was younger. I wish I'd had it. I wish there'd been the kind of spokesmanship or advocacy or conversation around all these subjects. That led to me, and I know a lot of people my age or younger or older, to just feeling very alone and not feeling like they were heard or could learn and educate themselves as well as being entertained. So doing it, it was a journey for myself as well. Like selfishly, I learned so much about things I thought I knew about myself, but also about the world. My drive is about connection and learning things from others and seeing how other people live. So that for me was one of the main driving points.
Great. Well, thank you. And you are incredibly vulnerable and open in the series, as well as funny and full of energy. But something that is kind of hard to hear is that you are working through so much shame, and a lot of queer people can relate to that. But I wonder, you talk quite a bit about that, especially in the first episode. And I wonder, now that the series has wrapped and there's been a little time in between, would you talk a little bit about how the series helped you in your journey to kind of shed some of that shame?
Yeah, I think what this show did is it brought back a lot of memories of shame. I don't know how much necessarily it's new or something that was still residing much within me. It just reminded how sad I had been and probably how I never processed it properly. It wasn't, I kind of left it. I never really went through it. I just kind of was like, oh, I'll always feel like this, and left it to kind of go. Like swept it under the rug almost. Instead, I decided to really celebrate queerness, celebrate everyone, see people who are proud, who really just inspired me in the way they live their lives. And I think, I don't know, I would advocate for queerness, but I just don't think I really ever enjoyed it as much. Obviously I did in some ways, but there were still parts of me where I'd still, yeah, it was like therapy, honestly. It was just so helpful. And especially to speak to other people who have gone through the same thing. I think that's one thing I never really had as a kid, is just to talk to people, to have a community, to connect with others and band together almost.
Yeah, well, thank you. And one of the things that you talk about in the first episode is wanting to be more of an advocate or an activist and get out there and really stand up for people. But I would argue, as a viewer, as a person who grew up and came out at a time when there was nobody in the media who was out, that you've been actually quite integral to probably a lot of people's coming out or coming into themselves. And I wonder, would you just kind of say a few words about what that means to you, that perhaps you have been that for someone?
And I love that, and I appreciate that, and I know that I've had a couple of fans and people say to me that I just always felt like I could have done more, only
Yeah.
because I felt that honestly I was telling people to live an honest life and to accept themselves and love themselves when I don't think I fully did yet.
Mm.
So it kind of felt not disingenuous because I really wanted that for other people, but there was a lot of things where I wanted other people to be happy and to accept themselves and love themselves, but not do it. So that's kind of more what I meant.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I just again like things about not going to Pride or I don't know, there was still just parts of me I hadn't unearthed, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, it's a journey.
It is, yes. But no, and also just to honor like people who came before. That was just the reason why I was able to kind of stand up proudly, even though I had shame. Just kind of be like, I love the person I love, or this is how I feel. That was because of everyone who come before and had faced that battle far harder. So in that, I'm so thankful.
Any particular situation in the series, was there something where you kind of surprised yourself in the way that you reacted or the way that it resonated for you later?
I was just so surprised about how vulnerable I became and how much everything brought up so many emotions.
Yeah.
Again, as I said, in terms of memory, but how much, I felt so much gratitude and so much pride in people. And yeah, I'm a lot more courageous than I give myself credit for. I mean, especially when they were saying, you'll find out when there's something to do with like, oh, I can find out more about myself, or that was something I was so, they were like, are you comfortable sticking a diode in your vagina and measuring, what turn you on in terms of porn? And I was like, yeah, 100%. That was always like a broach of a question, like you probably aren't going to want to do this. And I was like, 100% I want to do that. That sounds so fascinating to me. So that stuff I found really easy, weirdly. Um, seeing what happens to my blood when I have an orgasm. I was fascinated by. It was the hardest part for me was just kind of being myself on camera, but also hearing how much struggle people have gone through depending on different places. Yeah, it's that, like the dervish in Berlin, like again with love without borders. It's just like having to not be accepted from where you're from in the country you are and your family, and just having to leave that place and to be who you are. Like that is the most courageous, incredible thing I've ever heard. And you know I grew up in somewhere that's even more acceptable, and I found that so difficult. So just hearing these stories broke my heart, but seeing the strength really and showing that made me so happy, especially if there are people that can watch it and go, wow, that's the situation I'm in and I can do something about it.
Thanks so much to Cara for joining me. You can stream episodes of Planet Sex now on Hulu. It's one of the best class photos of the year. This year's nominees for the Academy Awards gathered in Los Angeles for the annual Oscars luncheon. Each nominee was individually called to the stage. Those in attendance posed for a group photo. The Oscars will air March 12th on ABC with Jimmy Kimmel as host. February is Black History Month, and today we want to celebrate writer, activist, and educator June Jordan. June Jordan is one of the most widely published and acclaimed writers of her generation. The Jamaican American was known for her work advocating for human rights and political activism. She published 27 volumes of work that included poems, essays, and children's books that discussed civil rights, women's rights, and sexual liberation. Jordan also taught at Yale and Cal Berkeley. Thank you for joining me on this Advocate today. We are advocating for all with our content and coverage. You can stream us on the Advocate channel for more Advocate Today episodes. I'm Tracy E. Gilchrist. I'll see you next time.